It's time for a Big Blue Kickoff Live.
Nobody can ever tell you that you couldn't do it, because you did.
On Giants.com.
You know what I saw? New York Giant pride.
And the Giants mobile app.
17-14 is the final. One touchdown, we are world champions. Believe it, and it will happen.
Part of the Giants Podcast Network.
Let's go out there like a bunch of crazy dogs. Have some fun.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Wednesday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live, brought to you by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the Giants. I am John Schmeelk, joined by my man Lance Medow. Lance, what's up, buddy?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. We're right here in the Giants Podcast Studio, presented by Hackensack and Meridian Health. Keep getting better. Johnny Mack on the controls. We appreciate you being with us today, and let the coaching search begin.
Let the festivities begin.
I will point this out at the start, and if I repeat myself about 2 bajillion times during this broadcast, I apologize. But we got to be very clear here. The Giants, as of now, have not confirmed any planned coach interviews that have happened, but there are many reports out there of what is coming down the pipe. So I'm going to throw some of those reports out there now. And again, just to stress, the Giants are not confirming any of these. We are not confirming any of these. I am simply referencing the reports that are out there. So here we go. Jeremy Fowler, among others, reporting that Giants interim head coach Mike Kafka completed his interview today. Also reporting out there by Mike Garafolo, and if there's others, I apologize, that the Giants had dinner with Kevin Stefanski last night, and they will interview him today. Tom Pelissero indicating Mike McCarthy will have an interview with the Giants. I believe he has that for tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe so. Schefter also had a similar report.
Yes, Schefter had that as well. Schefter also... and Jeremy Fowler also indicating that the Giants are going to interview Vance Joseph at some point for the head coaching position, as well as Raheem Morris, both of those on the docket. Keep in mind, and I mentioned these rules on Wednesday, and I want to be clear about it because I think I misspoke yesterday. I actually think I had it wrong. Anybody employed currently by another NFL team, including coordinators of teams that are out of the playoffs, can only do virtual this week. In fact, everybody that's employed by an NFL team can only do virtual this week and next. What I had wrong yesterday is that if you are not currently employed by any NFL team, you can do an in-person interview this week or next, which is the only difference you have. And then in-person interviews with people currently employed by NFL teams can happen after the divisional round of the playoffs, which is the week of Martin Luther King Jr. Day. So that's the difference there. Jordan Schultz saying that Cliff Kingsbury is going to interview with New York. Garafolo saying that Lou Anarumo is going to be interviewed by New York. Mike Garafolo also will report today that Charlie Bowlen could be the mix as a defensive coordinator candidate for the New York Football Giants. And I believe that's all the Giants news I have on here. Some other coaching news, just so I think it's important for us to know what's going on around the league, right? The Raiders with Davis Webb. They'll interview him for his head coaching candidate. They're also going to interview Matt Nagy, Vance Joseph, and Clint Kubiak. That's from Ian Rappaport, among others. The Browns interviewing Jim Schwartz, their current DC, and Tommy Rees, their current offensive coordinator, according to Adam Schefter. Albert Breer saying the Titans will interview Steve Spagnuolo on Wednesday for their head coaching position. Let's see.
Matt Nagy is also interviewing with a few teams. I believe the Cardinals, the Raiders, and the Titans.
Yes.
Is the latest report.
I have them on this list as well.
He's the Chiefs OC.
That is correct. And those are most of the reports that I have, and there are reports lingering out there from multiple reporters that the Giants are trying to set up an interview with John Harbaugh, who got let go yesterday. And that, of course, was the biggest news in the coaching search coming out last night, that the Ravens decided to move on from John Harbaugh as their head coach. And look, he has been really successful as a head coach. A winning percentage well over 60%, 6 division titles over the course, only 3 losing seasons in 18 years as the Ravens head coach. He won Coach of the Year. He has a Super Bowl title, got to the AFC Championship game as recently as 2023. They lost to the Chiefs that year, who went to the Super Bowl. So that is the newest name to enter the coaching fray. According to multiple reports, even teams that have current head coaches under contract have reached out to his agent to talk about it.
Yeah, according to multiple reports, yeah.
Apparently highly sought after, which is not a surprise. If you're looking for a coach with a long track record of success, there are now 2 of them on the market, of Mike McCarthy and John Harbaugh, and multiple reports that The Giants would be interested in interviewing him. They're trying to set up an interview. And also reports out there that John Harbaugh would be very interested in the Giants job and has positive feelings about Jackson Dart. So that's the name, Lance, and understandably so, that Giant fans will now get very excited about, given his track record of being a consistent winner in the National Football League. And quite frankly, head coach candidates with that sort of track record don't often become available.
Well, I actually tweeted this out the other day. It's the equivalency of a player that was unexpected to hit free agency. All of a sudden is now available, right? You thought maybe they'd be smacked with the franchise tag. They're now out there, so teams have to adjust their free agency approach, make tweaks in terms of the salary cap and so forth. Now, I don't think Harbaugh was a stunning development, John. There was a lot of speculation leading up to the end of the season that the loser of the Steelers-Ravens game may move on from their coach. So this didn't come out of nowhere, but it's the old story. Until we see it, we're not necessarily going to believe it. And it took at least a day or two till after that loss for the Ravens to decide to go their separate ways from John Harbaugh. I think the best way to describe it, John, is you mentioned how unique of a candidate he is because individuals like this don't hit the market. Make no mistake about it, John Harbaugh is interviewing the teams. It's not the opposite, okay? Because he has his full selection. So he is getting a feel for the setup of ownership, of whatever GM may be in place for all of these respective teams. And you mentioned, according to reports, there are a few that are either currently in the playoffs or are not that have a coach, and they may now be putting a feeler out. I would be stunned, though, John, if a team would fire their current coach unless Harbaugh or his representative gave some type of an indication that he's enthusiastically interested or wants to make the move, because there's no point of rolling the dice if you don't have a backup plan. But I wouldn't be surprised, and I think this could be to Harbaugh's advantage, if he does play the waiting game. Because let's just go down a hypothetical road here, okay? Let's say a team in the playoffs has an earlier than expected exit. Case in point, the Buffalo Bills. Okay, Sean McDermott's been there for just about 10 years. I'm just putting out a hypothetical. I'm not saying this is going to happen. Does that then change his perspective in terms of all the teams that are going after him, and it pops up, he didn't anticipate it, and now he wants an interview, he wants a dialogue? You got to be prepared that could very well come to fruition here.
Which is why if I think you're a team with a current opening and you have the opportunity to move quickly on something like this, it would behest you to move quickly on this if you possibly can.
Sure, but remember, it's the old story. It takes two to tango.
Correct.
And that candidate has to be willing to pass on other opportunities that could very well present themselves.
Right, but if you also say that if you don't say yes now, we're going to move on to somebody else, then
put the
if you're
pressure
that
on them.
candidate,
Yeah.
are you willing to say no to a job that you would like and you would be excited about? Because maybe in 3 or 4 days, another job might become available. That becomes a very risky proposition, too. So there's only 32 of these jobs, right? And in a lot of ways, teams are in the driver's seat. But you're right, in Harbaugh's case, with his history of success and the fact that, not to say that he could have his pick of jobs, because you don't know how many teams are going to hire him and how many jobs he would be willing to attach himself to, too, right? Because he has to decide, well, is this a place that, he's in his 60s. He's 63 years old, I believe, right?
Yeah.
So he's not going to want to attach himself to a job that he thinks is, all right, well, it's going to take me 2 or 3 years to build up this roster here to win. I don't think that's what he wants to get into after being with the Ravens for 18 years. And I mentioned it, only 3 losing seasons, and 2 of those losing seasons, they won 8-9. Right?
Yeah, they were borderline playoff team.
Correct. So they were in it to the end. So to me, that's something where if you're a team with an opening, I think you push the express button here a little bit on your process, if you can. Now, that's hard because there are rules. And, for example, the Rooney Rule, where you have to interview at least 2 minority candidates.
You cannot circumvent that.
Those have to be in-person interviews as well. So, like I mentioned, you can't interview anyone in person that's under employment with another team until after the divisional playoff. So that, again...
And you have to get permission, by the way, to interview those candidates.
That is true.
Too. That's another important caveat.
And the league does that by design because they don't want to disadvantage teams, or rather assistant coaches that are on playoff teams, which is, by the way, the right way to go about things.
Sure.
That's the correct way to do things. So we'll see what happens, and we'll see how they figure that out. I don't think there were any other new developments over the course of yesterday that need to be addressed. Again, I said this with Howard yesterday. According to reports, the Giants are going to interview Kevin Stefanski today. I think Gary Myers and other people and Garofalo they had dinner with him last night. Look, I know the record in Cleveland's not great. It's under 500, 11 games under 500 if I remember correctly. But 2 Coach of the Year awards. And just look at what he's had to deal with there. At the quarterback position, the Deshaun Watson saga, some of the talent on the roster, especially at the skill positions and wide receiver land's not the best. So to me, even though there isn't a consistent record of winning, I think he's done enough with what he's had there to me feel pretty good about that. And then, of course, you have all the potential coordinator candidates that we've talked about. So, and we've talked about Mike McCarthy and 12 straight wins with the Cowboys, multiple division titles, a 60% regular season winning percentage, Super Bowl champion with the Packers. So there's a lot of really good candidates out there that I think you interview that you feel really good about if you could hire those people. And Joe Shane and the Giants ownership will go through that process, and they'll decide who they think is the best possible candidate for the Giants.
With respect to Stefanski, 2023 stands out to me, and this is what you were alluding to, John. I mean, he had Joe Flacco, Deshaun Watson, P.J. Walker, Dorian Thompson, Robinson, and Jeff Driscoll. I mean,
5 quarterbacks.
That's how many guys started at least one game.
And what was the
that
record
season.
that year?
They went 11-6 overall.
That
so
should tell you all you need
that
to know.
is a heck of a job. But it's interesting because if you compare Stefanski to Harbaugh, the dynamics are different from this standpoint. And this, to me, is important to evaluate during the interview process. Stefanski has a play caller background. So when you speak to him, I think it's important to understand from his lens, if you were to be the head coach, do you want to be the play caller?
And ironically, Paul Schwartz reported in the Post yesterday, I believe, that he would prefer to be a CEO head coach and not be the play caller.
Because
which
he
I found
relinquished that
interesting.
this past season.
Correct.
He did give that up. Not to say that that's a bad thing. I mean, I could see it going both ways because at the end of the day, what also helped his reputation was his ability to call plays. Let's not forget about that. Whereas Harbaugh,
I mean, that's why he got hired in Cleveland, because he was such a good play caller in Minnesota.
Absolutely. Yeah, and if you remember, I mean, this goes back to reports when Shermer
Pat
was here.
Shurmur, yeah.
He wanted to bring him over. But the Vikings, and this
Correct.
is why permission is needed, it goes back to what we were just talking about. They had every right to step in and deny him the right to interview.
Because that was a lateral move.
Correct.
Right.
Exactly. When an OC is going for a head coaching job, it's a different story. But if it's OC to OC, DC to DC, or, backwards, that's where the team says, well, wait a minute, we don't want to lose you. You're not getting a promotion at the end of the day. But circling back to the difference between Stefanski and Harbaugh was a special teams coach. So you knew he was going to bring in coordinators. And that's the other element that I don't want to say it's overlooked, John, but whoever the Giants decide and whoever they're talking to, you want to know who they have in mind to call offensive and defensive plays.
Oh, it's probably the first question you ask.
Without a doubt. And that's why no matter who you bring in, they're going to be, yes, the guy pushing the buttons and game management is on their shoulders and so forth. But you want to know what their vision is in terms of who they're going to empower to call plays, or if they go in the direction of a Stefanski type of guy who wants to come in and call plays. For example, Mike McCarthy, let's bring him into the conversation. He called plays with the Dallas Cowboys.
Not his whole tenure.
No, but for some of it, and
But
then
for
with
most
Green
of it.
Bay even, for
Correct.
the majority of
Yes.
it. Where is he at this point in his career? Does he want to continue to do it, or does he want to delegate?
It sure seems like he's a guy that would want to do it, but yes.
Sure. Well, because I think a lot of these coaches, they say to themselves, if the turnover rate is what I like to call on steroids, okay? We see one and done. Pete Carroll, one and done, okay? So if you know that, John, if you have play calling ability, wouldn't you say, if I'm going to go down the drain, then I'm going to do it with my own decision-making and not put it in the hands of somebody else?
And look, as much as I like a head coach that doesn't have to do that, it's also an advantage for a team because you have a guy that's your head coach that's a really good play call on either the offensive or defensive side of the ball, taking a specific name out of it. That player, he can't be poached. You can't lose that play caller.
Yeah, because
right?
he's tied to another important factor.
Because he's your head coach. You
Yeah.
can't lose him. But if you have a head coach that's a CEO, you have an awesome offensive coordinator, go call Todd Bowles in Tampa Bay, and somebody hires your great play caller away, what are you going to do? You can't stop it. So now look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Compare their offense this year to what it was with Liam Cohen last year.
Yeah.
How does that look?
Well, and that was their third different offensive coordinator in 3 years. Remember,
Bingo.
Dave Canales went to Carolina. But I'm glad you brought that up because a big conversation piece, and I saw a lot of chatter out of Baltimore with what Mike McDonald is doing with the Seahawks. And remember, he was Harbaugh's defensive coordinator, and there's a lot of stories being written. Boy, Baltimore should have never let him leave the building. Hold on a minute. He got a promotion.
Yeah, what
in
are you gonna
order
do?
to keep Mike McDonald,
You
you would have had to
fired-
have fired Harbaugh. That is an idiotic philosophy and thought process.
After he made the AFC Championship game.
Yeah, I don't-
That's what you're going to do.
The logic that's
No.
being thrown out during these coaching searches and people doing 2020 hindsight is, I can't even put it into words, John. It really, it's nonsensical.
Yeah,
at this point.
like the Bucks, I'm sure if they could go in a time machine and say, yeah, well, we have like to hire Liam Cohen as the head coach. Yeah, sure. But you just made a run with Todd Bowles as your head coach.
multiple division titles with him.
It would have been
and your
that would have
defense
been
wasn't too shabby either. by the
very
way.
difficult change to make at that time. It's easy to look back and say in 2020 hindsight you can make that change, but it's impossible. It's like the whole thing with the Giants after the playoff season in 2022. Like, would you have liked to go back and maybe make some different decisions after that playoff year? Yes, very difficult to make those decisions in the moment after you just won a playoff game. So just stuff to keep in mind as you move forward. And I'll just going to end with this, and then we'll get to your calls here, 201-939-4513. I see we got a full bank of phones. I know people have opinions on this. They want to talk about it. Happy to discuss it with you. To me, Lance, while having a plan for Dart and putting a great offense together is hugely important, and it's got to be the second most important thing on my list, whoever your head coach has got to be, and again, this is a hard thing to interview for people that have not been a head coach before, but you need to bring in a head coach here, and Tiki and Jonathan Casillas have made this point with me on this program and on the pre- and post-game show on the radio. You need to bring in a head coach that is going to be a really good leader and hold everyone to a very high standard, every player, understand how to go to every player and have a plan to make them better on an individual basis. Tiki Barber talked about when Tom Coughlin got here, he brought every player into his room, and he had a way for every individual player to become better. For Tiki, it was ball protection with fumbling. And he said, look, Tiki, you're a great player. We love you. But if you fumble, you're not playing. For every player, even your best ones, they have to be held to a high standard. If they don't meet that standard, there are repercussions for it. And we saw Mike Kafka do that with Abdul Carter, right? When he came in, he wasn't meeting the standard, right? You're benched for a series. You're benched for a quarter, whatever the case might be, right? So that's what you need out of a head coach. And again, it's hard to know when you're interviewing coordinators that have never done it, who's going to fit that criteria. In fact, I would say it's almost impossible. Until someone's in that chair, you don't know how they're going to handle being in that chair. It's very easy for them to tell you they're going to do that. It's more difficult for them to actually do it once they're in the chair, right? We've seen John Harbaugh do that, right? So that to me is very important, to have a head coach that is a Tom Coughlin style head coach that is going to hold guys to a very high standard, coach the hell out of them, coach them hard. Even when players don't want to be coached hard, sometimes they need to be coached hard. Go ask Tiki about that. Go ask Michael Strahan about that. And other guys out here when Tom Coughlin showed up. That to me is the most important thing. Install a high standard that's expected from every one of your players. Coach on an individual level to reach those players, to make your individual players better. And that's the most important thing here. And look, John Harbaugh will see, that's a guy, to your point, who the coordinators are, right? Is it going to be Todd Monken? Who, I know a lot of fans are down on Todd Monken. The guy literally coached the Ravens to one of the best offenses in the history of not just that year. If you look at overall EPA per play and DVOA measures and offensive efficiency, it is one of the best offenses in the history of the National Football League 2 years ago. Was it the same this year? No. But Lamar Jackson was also banged up the whole year and couldn't move around and run. They had issues on the offensive line. It wasn't quite as good. Things happen. Tom Monken's a pretty good offensive coach. I would not have a problem with that, to be totally honest with you. So I don't know who else he's going to bring, what if he interviews, when he interviews, whatever. But that's kind of my last thing I want to say about as the Giants decide who the next head coach is going to be. Make your statement if you want, otherwise we'll get right to the calls.
Well, the only thing I'd piggyback is I think what's unique about this search is, as you read through the names, a number of them have previous head coaching experience, and that's not always the case. We go through cycles where it's potential, and you don't know. And I think my biggest issue with taking a risk of a coach that has not been the head man is, as you were hitting on, you don't know when you remove them from their bubble, meaning if they were just an OC or just a DC or a special teams coordinator, you don't know how they're going to respond to now being in charge of an entire team.
Correct.
Like Kafka was exposed to that, and he got a taste of it for himself, and the Giants saw that firsthand. And, him addressing Abdul Carter and getting into the defensive room and being very hands-on with other facets, I'm sure that made an impression on the Giants front office. But all of these other individuals who have never been head coaches, it's projection. And as we've gone over in NFL history, and I could sit here and talk about some of the most polished coaches, they're excellent coordinators. But when you put them in the front of the room,
exactly right,
they're not the same individuals. And you're not going to get a feel for that, John, even in an hour interview with a person.
Heck, even in an 8-hour interview with a person, you're not going to know.
Because until you throw them into the mix and you see how they interact, and, there's also a lot of coaches that are so bottled up in X's and O's, right? They're passionate. You put them in front of a chalkboard, John, they could sit there till they're blue in the face, going over play after play. But they don't have the same level of passion in giving pep talks and maybe having the one-on-one conversations or being that rah-rah mentality. To each their own.
Yeah, I don't really care about the rah-rah and pep talk part of it, but just in terms of being able to reach players and communicate with them.
That.
Correct, exactly right.
And some guys need that rah-rah stuff. That's why I brought that up. Others, they don't want to hear it, and they could see right through it, and it's shallow and it's hollow. But you need to have a balance of both. You need to be a really good X's and O's, adjusting, fitting pieces in. But at the same time, you have to know, John, when you need to push buttons to get guys to run through a brick wall.
Being a CEO, which is what a head coaching job is, it's a people person job.
Yeah, big time.
Everybody and every player and individual that works for you, whether in sports or any other business, Lance, they need different things from their boss to succeed. Some people need encouragement. Some people need to be, you have to be hard on them and you got to discipline them. Other people, you can kind of let them all do, let them do their own thing, and they're better if they're allowed to work on their own.
Leeway and so forth.
That's why being a head coach is so darn hard. In the offseason, you got 90 guys, and you got to figure out how to reach every individual player in a different way, and that's why it's such a tough job, to your point. Really is.
It's not easy to balance, and there's also individuals that, John, are not comfortable delegating to. They want to be overseeing every facet, and to be a head coach in the NFL, you don't have enough time in the week to do all of that. You have to let other guys do their thing, and I don't want to get off topic, but what I loved about Sean McVay, who was a first-time coach, here is why he excelled with the Rams. He got the head coaching gig, and what did he do? He brought in Wade Phillips as his defensive coordinator, which to me was a home run hire because he surrounded himself by a guy that's been there and done that, has been a head coach, and I'm not saying that this conversation happened, but he knew Wade could go to his corner of the facility, be in charge of the defense, and Sean didn't have to come to him every single minute of every single day and say, Wade, did you take care of this? Wade, are you looking at this film? Because he knew Wade Phillips is a highly respected coach who has had plenty of experience. So if you do go the route of a first-timer, you better make sure that they surround themselves with coordinators who are coaches before then and know a thing or two of how they can oversee the defense and be a very strong extension of the voice of the head coach. If you don't have that and everybody's sort of feeling out the process simultaneously, that could backfire immensely.
Yeah, and look, I'll go to a different sport, but one coach that, from my understanding, is someone that very much likes to do everything himself and is not a delegator, is Tom Thibodeau, who's just like, no, I'm in charge of this, I'm in charge of that, everything comes through me, it's my final decision, and, the lack of collaboration and stuff like that. So, and look, if you're a really good coach, that can work, but in the NFL, it's much harder because there's so much going on, and so much of what you're doing every day is not like physical hands-on coaching and X's and O's and even coaching players. It's being that manager and CEO. All right, folks, we're going to get to your calls. Just a reminder, go check out the John Settle podcast and draft season. Draft season's up there right now. Tony Pauline and I review what happened in the college football playoffs. We also do a top 12 mock draft because we know what the draft order is going to be. So make sure you check that out on your favorite podcast platform. And we'll have a lot of fun stuff coming your way on draft season this week. We're going to have I'm going to get an insider on today. I don't want to tease who it is. I haven't done it yet. So once it's in the bag, then I'll tell you who it is. But it should be a good interview talking about the Giants coaching search and then more stuff as the week goes along. Giants YouTube channel, too. Check it all out. 201-939-4513. Let's go to Jerry in Staten Island. He's going to lead us off today. What's up, Jerry?
How's it going, John?
What's
Lance,
up?
how are you?
We're good. Doing well.
I'm a first-time caller. I've been a Giants fan since 2007. I just have a few questions.
Sure.
The first being personally, who do you two feel that the New York Giants hire as their new head coach? Obviously, now that Harbaugh is available, I honestly think it's Harbaugh or bust, to be honest. But Stefanski is another good one. Secondly is I think I speak for a majority of our fans now when I say I find it astonishing, quite honestly, how a general manager can have so little success, and not to even take into account the 2023 draft that what happened with that, but let alone if we just look at the last 2 years, how you can go 3-14 and then 4-13 and still keep your job is quite astonishing to me. I have to get back to work. I just like to hear what you guys have to say on those two things. Oh, sorry, one more thing. Who do you guys feel that the Giants will take at round 1, pick 5? Thank you guys for taking my call.
Thank you, Jerry.
Let's stay Giants.
Yeah, those are very big whopper questions there. I'll work my way backwards. Look, it's way too early to know who they could pick at 5. I mean, you could have, who's on the board, who's gone 1 through 4. If Alvaro Reese is still there, could you take him? Sure. Could you take Carnell Tate? Sure. Could you take an offensive lineman if Jermaine Illuminor is in the back? Francis Mainoa, Spencer Fano? Sure. I mean, those are the guys that I would. Caleb Downs, you think he's just the best player on the board and you want to pick him at 5? Sure. Did I miss anybody? Keldrick Falk, do you really want to? Ruben Bain, these are all guys that I think, and if you go listen to Tony Pauline and I's mock draft on draft season, we kind of go through all these players and who might be available for the Giants and who they might be interested in. So way too early. I mean, hell, the college season's not even over yet.
Yeah,
so
we still got the
the
semifinals,
scouting process isn't even done yet. So that's where I'll go. I don't think I hit most of the big names there, Lance. I don't think I missed anybody as a potential top.
No, I would have
5
thrown
pick.
out all those names. I mean, the only thing I would add with Illuminor is we got to see what happens with Wan'Dale Robinson, too,
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
would influence the wide receiver position and maybe give them more ammunition to use the 5th overall pick there.
Yeah, free agency has
That
a
has
huge
to come
impact on your
first, and
needs.
you got to evaluate that first.
In terms of Joe Shane, we kind of talked about this yesterday. Go, look, guys, the results are what they are, and we're not going to defend in the wins or losses here. It's been rough. I get it. Giants put out their statement yesterday as to why they're keeping him on. In terms of they liked some of the young players in the young core here, and I think when you do look at, you mentioned the draft picks, right? Look at the top of the draft order, and you just look at the number of really good players on the teams at the top of the draft order. Other teams don't have Dexter Lawrence's and Brian Burns and Malik Neighbors and guys like that are really good football players on them the way the Giants do. So I think that's part of it. Now, are some of those guys here before Joe Shane got here? Yes. They played sticker value on Brian Burns, sure, and, top 5 picks. You get good players at top 5 picks, sure. But they did, and those moves still were made. And I think at the time when he made some of these moves, and we've talked about them at the time on this show, for those of you who have listened, I think at the time, a lot of these moves did make sense, right? Like John Michael Schmitz, good value, 2nd round. Deontay Banks, people thought that's about where you should have been picked. Even the moves that didn't work out, for sure. I mentioned Banks, like Evan Neal. He could have been the top overall pick in that year's draft. And at that time, that's where he was rated. Now, have those moves and the results not worked out the way you wanted? Sure, absolutely. And I understand why fans would think that and be upset. But I think the Giants have liked the process as much as, again, the results have not been what you want them to be in terms of record, and they feel like that process will lead to success later on. And I think that's kind of how I would sum it up the best. Or you think that's fair?
Well, I'd also throw in Joe Shane's staff,
Yep.
Brendan Brown, who works under him too. I think the continuity factor, John, whether fans like that or not, I think did play a role. And also...
And by the way, they did mention that in the statement, the continuity factor.
But, I mean, you don't even have to have read the statement. I think even if what I was going to throw in to add to what you just mentioned, it's the same thing when I have conversations on and off the air with Steelers fans, for example. I'm not comparing the two, but, the families are tied, obviously. It's an old school philosophy. You need one hand in terms of how many GMs and coaches the Steelers have had going back to the 1970s. Well, even though the Giants' results have not been the same as the Steelers, if you look at the number of general managers, John, that this organization has had, you need pretty much one hand, okay? They have not had a revolving door philosophy. I'm not talking about coaches.
Accorsi, Jerry Reese, Dave Gettleman, Joe Shane.
And Gettleman was previously with the Giants, remember? So I know it was a new GM, but continuity, a guy that had worked when Jerry Reese was here and so forth. So you take all of that into consideration. I don't think it's a surprising development that they're sticking with continuity. We like some of the signs that's going on behind backdoor channels, some of the upside of the talent, the arrival of Jackson Dart, and that the philosophy is you bring in a coach that could take now this talent and hope to elevate it.
Yeah.
That's the thought process. Once again, we're just explaining by connecting the dots. I'm not campaigning to say you have to agree with it or you have to like
neither.
it.
Absolutely
but
right.
John and I are just telling you where the philosophy comes from a historical standpoint and a contemporary standpoint. And that's why it's not a stunning development. And also, as I even pointed out on social media, the Giants made it clear in their statement, John, when they let go of Brian Daboll, that Joe Schoen was going to remain as the general manager. So the statement that was released earlier this week essentially reiterated what was said when Daboll was let go. Another indication that it wasn't a stunning development based on what played out over the last few days.
And we understand why fans might be upset about that, and we get it based on the record. We totally understand, and that's kind of where we are. And in terms of the coaches, I think I'm not here to tell Joe Schoen, Mr. Mara, Mr. Tisch who to hire as their next head coach, obviously. But I think the couple names you mentioned are good ones. I like the idea of hiring somebody that has had success doing it before at this point, just because where the Giants are. You need to pull yourselves out of the cycle that you've been in. I went through it, Lance. Since 2016, this team's had 6 different head coaches, if you include the interim head coaches.
Yeah.
If you go to 2017, right? Because you had McAdoo and Spags both in 2017.
Sure, I would throw that in. You go post-Coughlin. I think that's the way to operate.
So that's a lot of coaches in a short period of time. A lot of coaches. And you need to end that cycle. And whenever you hire anybody, you're taking a risk. There's no way to know who's going to be a good coach unless there's someone you've seen do the job and do it well. Then you have a pretty good idea that guy's going to be a good head coach, right? So I think the Harbaughs, the McCarthys, and I'm not going to just name one guy, but the Harbaughs, the McCarthy, I'll even throw Stefanski, even though I think it's a little bit of a different category based on the level of success that he's had, are the guys that I would look at and favor just before I start the interview process. But I got to be honest with you, if you get into one of these interviews and one of these coordinators just absolutely blows your mind, I wouldn't rule that out either. I think you have to be very open with this and pick the best guy that you think is going to lead this organization going forward. Even if it's not a popular pick, you have to do your best with all the information you have available to pick the best guy. But I do think there's an advantage to having seen somebody do the job for a long time and be successful at it. And I do think that lowers your risk variable a lot, because you're not putting somebody in a job that they've never done before.
And I think based on the volume of coaches that they've had in a short period of time, I think the Giants are in a position where they have to lower the risk. I don't think they can afford to roll the dice as much as maybe they've done in the previous cycles. The other thing that I wanted to add from a context standpoint, John, is of all the coaches that you listed, the only one that had previous experience was Pat Shurmur. And I know Pat Shurmur was here for a short period of time. I would still argue, I think he did a really nice job with Daniel Jones as a rookie, and that maybe gets lost in translation,
I think that's fair.
Even all these years later. But the point is, the last few, you've taken a chance on either somebody that's been a good coordinator or comes from a good coaching tree. So the fact that there's volume in this cycle of proven head coaches, my personal opinion is I would try to prioritize that, and I would peel back the layers through the interviews and find every reason why you shouldn't go in that direction, John. And if you get a laundry list of reasons why you shouldn't, okay, then entertain the potential. But I think what they've done recently and the number of candidates like the McCarthys, like the Harbaughs, Stefanski maybe doesn't come from the same pedigree, but he's been in Cleveland for several years and he doesn't have an overwhelming amount of talent certain years, and he's found ways to win. He also has ties to the East Coast. His father was a very well-respected NBA executive, so he's been around.
Stefanski for the Nets.
That culture of what it takes to build the team, even though I don't love that word. So you take all that into consideration. I would think that of those three, one of them perhaps would be appealing to maybe give the Giants some real food for thought.
And by the way, I will also tip my cap to Mike Kafka, because to the point you made before, they've seen him do the job now for 7 games.
Yeah.
So that, I think, gives him a little bit of an advantage as well.
The other thing I wanted to throw in that we didn't bring up that I thought takeaway from Joe Shane's press conference, by the way, that I just wanted to say, he was asked about getting a head start on the process, John, if you recall, because that's what happens when you let go of a coach.
And by the way, Scotty Young on YouTube asked, why did not they interview a guy like McCarthy before the season ended? So I think this will go into your point here.
Yeah, and I thought his answer was interesting, that they were doing their due diligence. They were bringing in the analytics, coaching decisions, and I'm sure McCarthy was put under that microscope.
And even watching like press conferences.
That was what I wanted to get to. Yeah, I thought that was the fascinating
part. I thought it was
part.
interesting too. I agree.
When he said that he had some flexibility and he wouldn't have had the time previously where during the week, and I do this every time I'm prepping for a Giants opponent. I watch, as you well know, it's well documented.
No, you do a good job
I
with
do
it.
the post-game press conference,
really
but
do.
I also watch the press conference leading up because I think you'll learn a lot. And I'm not saying that I have all the time in my world, but when I'm doing work, you have it on in the background, you can pick up on things. And I love hearing opposing coordinators because I also think it gives you an indication of, boy, they could command the podium. You know, they got that it factor.
And there is something there. Look, that can't be the number one factor.
Not at all.
But it's not important. Like the way, for example, the way Aaron Glenn handled the podium the first 4 or 5 weeks this year. No bueno. No good. and you could tell he knew that because the Aaron Glenn you saw at the podium in the last 4 weeks
backpedaling
was completely different than the Aaron Glenn you saw at the podium the first 4 weeks, right? Different guy. So you're right. Doing well at that is important. Not important as a lot of other stuff, but you're right. It is important.
So that was interesting because I think you get a read on personality-wise, John, how they handle the media. And I don't love the generic philosophy of New York's cut from a different cloth and you have to have a certain personality. Maybe that's the case. But I think most coaches who are experienced, who understand the inner workings of how you have to massage the media and what you can get away with saying, even out of market, can handle it. But I do think him getting a taste of that is important. But I thought you brought up an important element, and this was going to be the second part.
Sorry.
You should you should not hire a coach because he blew you away in a press conference. And I'm going to go back to John, and fans reacted. If you remember, I was at the Joe Judge press conference and, get the hard hats on, and we're going to build a team like individuals from New Jersey, and I'll still quote it left and right as if I was in front of him yesterday. And the newspapers ran with it, and everybody wanted to run through a brick wall.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, the man did not coach one football game, and already the bold declarations, even though we're going to get to some of mine probably later on in the show, okay? I'm cut from a different cloth, though. Anyway, you can say that you don't necessarily have a read on a coach just because he wowed you in a press conference. And by the way, as John continues to chuckle, for those that are not watching the program, that was my intention from the start. Nick Sirianni did not have an impressive press conference. If you go back,
it was a disaster.
Right? I mean, he couldn't put a sentence together. He just seemed nervous.
How about the Liam Cohen-Duval debacle?
Correct. That was another one. And Liam Cohen's having the last laugh, which is a nice segue to what's going to happen later on the show. But anyway, I get back to the point today. And Sirianni helped the Eagles win a championship. So for those of you that want to put a great deal of stock in press conferences, buyer beware in terms of the judgments that happen so early in the process.
And ironically, it was multiple Joe Judge press conferences at the end of his tenure that maybe did not help him hold that job for another year as well.
By the way, did you see the quote he said the other day about the chaos going around Ole Miss?
I did not.
If you did not, I don't want to spoil it. Go online and Google what he really had a great quote.
Is it a written quote or is it like, did he say it?
I didn't see the video. I saw everybody quoting it, but it's some quote. So for our viewers and listeners,
I'm going to bring it up at some point.
Well, if you want to bring it up, okay, that's fine. It was going to be a little bit of a tease. I didn't want to get completely off topic.
No, I don't.
But it reminded me.
Right.
He had quite the line. With respect to the.
I apologize, callers. Our first caller asked a very complicated 3-part question that we
there
had
were
to
a lot
get
of
to.
different
There
layers.
were a lot of layers to that.
So
we'll get to the final 3 callers. So we got Andrew, we got Wilson, we got Jay, and guys, this coaching stuff is probably going to go on again because of the NFL rules. It's designed this way for a couple of weeks. Would be my bet. Based on when you're allowed to interview people on virtually and in person. So we got a lot of time to talk about the coaching search. And Pearson's going to pop in the last 5 minutes. We got to do our I haven't looked at what the totals are. Pearson tallied everything.
Oh, he did? Okay. Well, good. He was doing his good job.
To who won the win contest, and I purposely have not looked at the document, so he'll come in and he will
you know
tell
I
us
haven't, so
what
yeah.
the deal is. So we will check that out, but let's get back to your calls. We appreciate you guys calling in, being with us, and giving us your opinions on the coaching search. Let's go to Andrew in Virginia. He's up next. Andrew, what's going on, pal?
Hey, guys. I'm not going to waste a bunch of time with negatives. Thank you, Mike Kafka, for your service. Putting in the hard work and bringing the rest of the gang as far as they could possibly come this season. Much appreciated. I read reports that he finished his interview about an hour ago or so.
Yep, that's what the report said.
Good luck to Mike.
Yep.
Okay. I just want to cite a poll out there with thousands of votes. Over 96. It's trending towards 97% support for John Harbaugh from the fans, from a super fan.
I agree. Right? I would just say be wary of thinking that Twitter is the equivalent of real life. Now, I do think in this situation, it probably is closer to real life than other polls that I've seen. But yes, well, I hear you.
Here's what I'll say. We carry on Giants chat all over the place, including on Twitter Spaces and things.
Yep.
I have never seen, since going back to Tom Coughlin in the heyday, and you know I've followed the show since the very beginning.
Yes, sir.
I've never seen the fan base rally around a candidate like I have in the last 24 hours. It's not only that the perfect timing has fallen in our favor here, it's almost like prayers were answered. It is that level of support. That's where we are from a fan's perspective, by and large.
I get it. No, look, Andrew, look, and by the way, I understand
have been exciting.
Andrew, by the way, I completely understand why you would think about it that way. Because he has a large body of work and success. Ironically, if you compare their bodies of work, him and Mike McCarthy's bodies of works are actually almost identical when you look at them. I find it odd that they're not talked about the same exact way. But
it's true.
But look, Andrew, you're right. Look, I get it. Look, he has 18 years, 6 division titles. And by the way, in a division with Ben Roethlisberger, Mike Tomlin, and the Steelers. 6 division titles, 3 losing seasons, 2 of which they won 8 games. In those 2 losing seasons, a Super Bowl, multiple AFC championships, AFC championship game appearances, a coach of the year. He checks every single box. I totally get where you're coming from.
And he's a cultural fit. He's a classy guy.
I agree.
Our parting view of him in Baltimore was him consoling his rookie kicker for missing the kick and costing him the job. You don't find these candidates every day. And it just made our job a lot easier. So now we have to, like a couple of diver scallops, put a little butter on them and get them to the plate. Don't screw them up.
Close the deal, right? Close the deal.
We literally hired Joe Judge in this guy's image. Okay, now we got the real McCoy.
That's a fair point.
So it's just like when Andy Reid left Philly, Chiefs got very, very lucky. And even Tom Coughlin, people couldn't wait to get rid of it. Now we're realizing the error of our ways. We cannot screw this timing up because it's rare. We got to go get him. Don't let him. I know you got to do the interviews and everything, but that's our guy. And for a question for you guys to leave you with.
Yes.
Please, you've mentioned Harbaugh, Stefanski, McCarthy. I'm not going to bring the other people in there. I know they got like Lou Anarumo and everything. I'm going to go with the 3 former head coaches that you've mentioned. Please rank the qualities of these people, not the qualifications. What are the qualities that these people bring? What might be a little different about each?
Okay.
But what are the priorities for you going forward? Thank you. I'll talk to you later in the offseason.
Okay, no, Andrew, I think that's actually a really good question. Great question so far, guys. You guys done a great job. And by the way, you can even throw Vance Joseph into that equation. He was a former head coach. Now, it was a very abbreviated.
At Denver, yeah.
I think,
and Raheem Morris was a head coach, too.
Correct. I think he only went 22 games in Denver, I think.
It was short, 11, And then coincidentally, he returned as the defensive coordinator, which you don't see happen very often.
No, I actually have his
I can bring it up
record here. 11-21, I want to say, in Denver. 11-21, if I remember correctly. The qualities, that's interesting. I would say
11-21 in 2 seasons.
That's what I thought. I think if you look at those, and I'll just throw Vance Joseph in there, just because he's also a former head coach, right? So you kind of keep that. I don't know if you want to put Cliff Kingsbury into that mix.
Kingsbury's a former coach too. Yeah, I mean they all apply.
We can do that too. In terms of an offensive mind, I would give the nod to Stefanski of that group in terms of building a hard-nosed, tough culture. I would give the nod to Harbaugh in that group. In terms of quarterback development, I would probably give the nod to Mike McCarthy in that group with what he did with Aaron Rodgers and Dak Prescott. In terms of defensive mind, I would give the nod to Vance Joseph in that group. And I think that would be, I think that's what he means by qualities, right? I would guess in terms of what he means by like qualities and characteristics. That's kind of how I would spread those out over that group of guys.
Raheem Morris, I would throw in with Vance Joseph, a very good defensive mind.
I
He
agree
did
with
a
that.
great job
Also
with the Rams.
former head coach, good point.
Yeah, so Morris deserves credit.
And Kingsbury would be in the offensive group with Stefanski.
Yeah.
But I'm just not a big fan of his style. I don't want to do shotgun spread stuff here. I know Dart, by the way, his style actually fits what Dart did in college really well. That's not the style of offense that I want to go after here.
McCarthy is a little bit maybe old school in terms of his offensive philosophy compared to Stefanski, which I would say is more of the new school.
McCarthy's old school West Coast offense, correct.
So you have to ask yourself what is not necessarily the best fit for Dart, but the rest of the personnel you have. And I think Stefanski doesn't have the same track record as McCarthy in terms of quarterback development, but, given how many different quarterbacks he's worked with and what he did as an offensive coordinator, and he worked with, a few in Minnesota, so I would say that's an extension of the QB development, and him getting his hands potentially on a Jackson Dart, I think would be an intriguing marriage. The thing about Stefanski and McCarthy and Harbaugh, I would probably put in the same boat, but Stefanski comes across as a very even-keeled personality.
Totally agree.
Okay, which I think is very good for this market if you want to go down that road. And this fits into that quality question that the last caller just asked, meaning Stefanski, he's not going to get overly excited. He's not going to, run through a brick wall. He's not going to take off his shirt. He's going to be very cool, calm, and collected. And I don't know Stefanski personally. I know a lot of people that know him from my work with the Ivy League. Columbia's former coach coached him at Penn when he was a player.
Oh, interesting.
And I've had very many conversations with him and clearly speaks very highly of him. I know a number of people that are around the Ivy that, have a great deal of respect for the man. Okay? Forget the football side. Just a good guy who is not going to seek the limelight. He's going to do everything that's humanly possible that is good for his players and the team. And I think that is appealing in terms of the quality of the coach, but he clearly has an offensive background, and his experience with maybe some of the newer generation of quarterbacks maybe adds a little bit of an additional layer of intrigue compared to McCarthy from that standpoint.
And I will add, too, that I talked to our mutual friend Aaron Goldhammer, who has covered Stefanski in Cleveland for a long time for ESPN Cleveland. Don't expect very exciting press conferences from
that's what I was going to get to. Sure.
He actually said he's kind of like Belichickian, where he doesn't give you much. So it'll be a smooth transition from Brian Dable to Kevin Stefanski, if that's who the Giants end up hiring. But yeah, look, just solid guy. And look, I think the other thing, and I think Harbaugh to an extent, he's been there for 18 years, so I'm sure he's seen fair share of stuff too. But the amount of crazy stuff that McCarthy has to deal with in Dallas with Jerry Jones and the way he runs the building, and the amount of crazy stuff that's happened in Cleveland over the years between Deshaun Watson and everything else, and the Myles Garrett stuff. Both of those guys, I think, have a pretty good history of showing that they can deal with controversy fairly well and not make it worse, because you can make it worse. They haven't made those situations worse. So I think that's another thing that you could put in their column, that they've handled that stuff well.
And one other thing I want to add about McCarthy, because I'm sure a lot of people are bringing up maybe his lack of postseason success.
He did win a Super Bowl.
No, he did. Listen, I'm a big defender of him, but I don't think, at least from the Giants fan perspective, if you want stability, you're in no position to criticize a guy like Mike McCarthy, who's taken and guided his teams to the playoffs.
Both me and you
every
have
single year.
I mean, me and you have fought with Paul Dottino about that on this very show many times, and Howard Cross for that matter.
Yeah, it's a silly perspective. I'm still stunned. And I understand, Jerry Jones in Dallas, a little bit different. The man took that team to 12-5 in 3 consecutive years. I know the last season they didn't make the playoffs, and he lost his job. I mean, what do you have to do?
I mean, you know how it is. I mean,
keep your job. No, but that's crazy, John.
I understand.
That is crazy.
But look,
to a certain degree.
Just the way the NFL works, it's unless you win a Super Bowl, guys will generally keep jobs for more than 5 or 6 years.
In today's NFL.
That's just kind of the way it goes now.
Harbaugh and Tomlin are the exceptions to the rule.
But they both won Super Bowls.
But Tomlin won a Super Bowl a long time, and
both of them.
it's been Harbaugh too.
Yeah.
But those
Harbaugh
teams,
was 12, right? 2012, correct?
I believe so. Yeah,
right?
that was the San Francisco.
Yeah, and Tomlin
matchup.
was 2010?
Or was it 9?
Or was it
9?
9? It might have been 9.
Right.
No,
Yeah.
it was 9 because 10 was Pittsburgh beating. No, wait. No, 10. Pittsburgh beating Arizona.
Yeah.
Correct?
Okay, I wasn't sure.
No, that was 8. Pittsburgh beat Arizona in 08.
That's
remember,
right.
That
so
was
the Super Bowl was in 09 and it was the 08
correct,
season.
Because I remember the Giants beat every team that regular season that had went all the way, and then the Burris thing
So,
happened.
I mean, the point is, a long time has gone by since they have claimed some hardware, but they're consistently getting their teams in position to make the playoffs.
Yes.
And, oh, by the way, we just had another season where just about half the playoff field has changed.
Yes.
So if you're a coach that actually has been the exception to the rule, I am the first person that I would give credit for accomplishing that.
Of course,
feat.
it does help. Mike McCarthy had Aaron Rodgers and Dak Prescott. John Harbaugh had Joe Flacco and Lamar Jackson. And Mike Tomlin had Ben Roethlisberger.
Yep.
But since Roethlisberger's left, it's been a disaster at quarterback, and he still figures out a way to go over 500 every year, which is really the most impressive thing. Anyway, 2 more calls, and then Pierce will come on, and we will recap our win totals for the year with Mr. Butler. Let's go to Wilson and Roxbury. Wilson, what's going on, pal?
Hey, Johnny, Lance, Happy New Year.
We've had a very good, calm, intelligent back-and-forth show, Wilson. Let's keep it up.
Okay, all right. I want to ask you first, Johnny, you're not going to hang up on me, right, if I don't tell you what you want to hear, right?
I never hang up on you, Wilson. As long as you're not mean or rude, I don't hang up on you.
You don't.
So just make your point. Wilson, we're late. Make your point. Get to it.
Listen, Johnny, all these decisions, I'm going to choose my words carefully, are based upon, Mr. Mara's health, which my thoughts and prayers are with him. But you're not going to get a coach here, a serious coach, when one of the main culprits of this mess that we've been here for the past 3 years, because you have won 11 games in 3 years, is still here. Okay, until you stop banging your head against the wall and wait for a different result, nothing's going to change. I mean, I'm not going to be crazy enough to call you and question John Harbaugh's job or Stefanski's job, but it's like you starting always. Oh, there's always a problem because next year this guy is still here. What about this guy says the roster is no good? It's never done the right way, man. I hope I'm wrong because I'm sick and tired of losing, Johnny. I'm sick and tired of losing. But this guy's gonna say, what about the roster is not as good as everybody thinks it is?
Well, we'll find out.
Well, that's why you interview him.
And we will find out when the new coach is here. Look, you know how I look at it, Wilson. I'm always one to look at. I start small. I start on the field because I know when I play sports, I take responsibility for what I do. And you talk to Brian Burns. He's like, guys, look, we're the players. We're on the field. We got to make plays. So that's why I look at it too, Wilson. I'm with you, and we'll see what it looks like when the new coach is here. But I do think there are. But Wilson, if you do look at the 10 worst teams in the league and you look at the draft order, the Giants do have a better, more talented roster than the majority of those other teams.
I think so too. I think a lot of it was coaching. I'm just saying that I hope that Joe Shane being here doesn't deter a top candidate from coming.
And I don't think it will, Wilson.
That's my only concern. That's my only concern.
Wilson,
wrong,
and by the way, I totally get that concern, and we've had other callers call up and ask about that too, and I understand it. And
I didn't know.
No, it's okay. No, Wilson, you're fine. It was like last week. You're good. But look, and I totally get the concern, but just remember, there are only 32 of these jobs in the world.
Oh, I understand that, Johnny, but you don't want to hire somebody just because he's there for a job,
Oh, no,
I don't think that is going to happen.
Listen, that's my point. My point is that it's very difficult to turn down a job like this. And that's my point. So I would be very surprised.
I'll say to everybody, hey, don't worry about it. I'll make it work. But,
given the talent on the roster,
right.
The young quarterback that's here that a lot of coaches, according to reports, tend to really like,
right.
the stability and reliability of ownership, I would be very, 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 very surprised if you saw coaches turn down this job if it was offered to them. And if I end up being wrong, I will take the spear to the chest and I'll be wrong, but I'd be shocked
Johnny,
by that.
But listen, Johnny, if everybody is right about the talent on the show, on the team and everything, with the right head coach, I don't see why the Giants should not be, if not in the playoffs, right there at the end of the year.
Wilson, they should be in playoff contention next year. I don't think any of us would argue with that. They should have been in playoff contention this year, and that's why they had to make the changes they made.
Right. Listen, Johnny, you don't got to tell me. I told you this quite a few times, and I got you. I got killed for it. But listen, that's in the past, man. It just this has got to be one of the most important hires, and probably it's got to be top 5 the most important hires in the 100 years of this franchise.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
thanks again for the
thanks,
guys.
Yeah, well, I mean, listen,
appreciate it.
Every time they go through a coaching cycle, it's an important decision.
100%.
I mean, I don't think you need to say this is top 5, whereas 2 years ago, whatever, it was unimportant. I mean, it's always important because, I mean, it's the face of your franchise and it's the guy that's going to set the tone. As far as I think what the last caller may have been alluding to, and Joe Schoen even addressed this in his press conference, because just for context purposes.
Oh, he was asked it directly.
Yeah. Well, but just for context purposes, for maybe members of the audience that didn't follow, Liam Cohen initially turned down the Jaguars' head coaching job last year, okay? Because Trent Baalke was the general manager, but he didn't have a great reputation in NFL circles. And bringing this back to the Harbaugh family, one of the reasons why Jim left San Francisco is he and Trent Baalke did not get along because he was the GM. So Baalke then winds up in Jacksonville. Liam Cohen must have gotten feedback from his colleagues and so forth, and he turned it down. And then Jacksonville winds up removing Baalke, and then Liam Cohen takes the job, and they bring in a new general manager. So Joe Schoen referenced that and said that that was a rare occurrence, which is the case, and said that from the conversations he's had with potential candidates, it doesn't seem as if having a general manager in place is going to deter people from being interested in the job. The one thing, though, that I do find interesting, John, at least from the Harbaugh side of things, Jim went to the Chargers 2 years ago. They did not have a general manager. He handpicked Joe Ortiz, who was actually with his brother in Baltimore. I don't know where John stands on his philosophy, meaning does he want to do what his brother did? If that's the case, and I'm just talking out of a hypothetical, Atlanta would be attractive because the Falcons are the only team out of the 7 that have vacancies that cleaned house. Everybody else who removed the coach has a general manager in place. So if that's what he wants to do, then you would say, well, there's really only one location that makes sense. Or is he more of the philosophy, I'm going to work with who's ever in place?
And I don't sense that Joe Judge's that I'm looking up the quote that Joe Schoen has a bad reputation around.
No, I don't get that either.
I don't get that at all.
And he's been with several different organizations before coming to the Giants. He also was mentored by Bill Parcells.
He worked extremely well with Brian Daboll. That was never a problem. There was never sniping in the media with one blaming the other. Even with all the losing, there was never any of that.
And the reason why, once again, I'm bringing up where John Harbaugh may come from is he had the luxury of working with Ozzie Newsome and Eric DeCosta. Just like Pittsburgh. Once again, you need one hand to talk about the executives in those front offices. He had a very good rapport and relationship with the individuals that were in charge in conjunction with Harbaugh of putting the roster together. So I could tell you this, it's going to be a talking point. Based on what he came from, John, you know that the dynamics of the relationship with the general manager is going to be critical, but I can't get into his head. I don't know whether he wants to be empowered or he's totally okay with building a new relationship from scratch. I mean, everybody's different. I can only judge what his brother did, and his brother clearly, and I'm sure a lot of this had to do with his experience in San Francisco with Baalke. He said, if I'm going to get a new head coaching job on the NFL level, I'm going to have the guy that I want helping to put the roster together. So a little bit of different experience that Jim Harbaugh had in his first go-around compared to John.
Jay, I don't want to rush you, but just get to your point quick here. We're about 1:30 already. Jay, what's going on, man?
Yeah, no problem. Just to inject a little positivity, I think, we're all disappointed with the season. Lots of feelings about Joe Schoen coming back. I have some of those as well, but he is back. Let's move forward. Exactly right. What I'm looking for what I'm excited about is to be looking for a coach in this cycle at this time with a quarterback that coaches want to work with a quarterback that our players respect and believe is their leader. I think we're in a pretty good spot, and you can see why we're so attractive. hopeful that they'll get it right. I'm on with you guys. Let's go for a guy who's had experience, and there's some really good names out there. So I think this is a good time for us to move forward. And so I'll leave it at that. I had some other. Oh, I did want to say this. Do you guys know if at any point in the process they involve veteran Giants in the coach search process? And I don't mean interviewing, but maybe they consult with them, because Carl Banks, Tiki Barber, Sean O'Hara, Amani Toomer, and the rest of them, they know what this culture's like. And I want to see that impact their voice, them have a voice instead of just ringing a bell on game day or showing up when we get our butts kicked. Involve these guys who know what it takes to win as Giants involved in some capacity. That's my thought.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Jay.
Guys. Have a great day.
You too.
You too. Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that question. Maybe if they have a personal relationship with one of the candidates, I could see that phone call being placed, but I'm not that familiar with it, to be honest with you. I don't know the answer to that.
I have not seen anything well documented, both in and out of the building, to say that that's the case. I'm sure it's being brought up, John, because of the reports that Troy Aikman is being brought in as a consultant
by the
for the Dolphins.
Yeah.
And a big part of that, by the way, is the Jimmy Johnson connection, who was previously the Dolphins coach and obviously coached Troy Aikman to multiple Super Bowls with the Cowboys. But it's possible they may be informally involved. Once again, I'm just talking without any inner knowledge, that maybe in passing conversations, what do you think of a guy, and so forth. But as far as being in the room and taking part in the interview process, that to me is a little bit different in terms of what you may be asking from a former player.
So the Aaron Hernandez quote, is that the one?
That's the one. So you saw it now.
It is a good line.
Yes.
This is not really my most chaotic week. I did live next door to Aaron Hernandez.
Correct. He was referencing that he was a neighbor to Aaron Hernandez when he was with the Patriots. So, boy.
That's not bad.
Yeah. That was some line in terms of him now trying to guide the Ole Miss program as they enter the semis tonight.
All right, let's bring in Pearson Butler. Pearson, I have not looked at your final tally, so I'm going to be surprised here. So I will let you surprise us. Pearson, give us the final standings starting at the bottom of our wins pool. If you want to give the teams each one of us had first, maybe, and then give who finished in third, second, and first, you can.
All right. So Lance chose the Chiefs, the Chargers, the Rams, the Vikings, the Bengals, the Bucks, the Cowboys, and the Jaguars.
Jaguars is a good one.
Yeah.
Schmeelk, you chose the Bills, Ravens, Eagles, Packers, Texans, Lions, Raiders, Steelers.
Oh, Raiders. By the way, and just for the record, me and Lance chose our teams first, and then we let Pearson get the pick of the rest of the team.
Yeah.
So, Pearson, who did you have?
I had the Broncos, the Niners, the Seahawks.
That's pretty good.
Yeah,
the Dolphins.
That's pretty good.
Commanders, the Bears,
good.
The Falcons, the Patriots.
Wow. That's I think I know who won this contest.
I think based on his first three that he mentioned.
So, third place,
Bears.
Lance with
yes!
72 wins. Your highs were the Jaguars, the Rams, and the Chargers.
And the crazy thing is the way we did this rule, folks, is that everyone had to pick, 6 good teams and then 2 teams that finished in the top.
The playoffs.
No, and one that had a first-year coach, too.
Oh, is that one of them that had to be a first year? I thought it was 2 teams that finished in the top, had picked in the top 10 of the draft or something like that.
Because, the context, I didn't go back and watch the entire show. I just watched the Jaguars part. But
of course, that's the one you want.
The one you tweeted
Well, that was also when John said he wanted to come back this week or next week to actually have this conversation.
No, I was
so that's what I was really checking up
I got
on.
It.
From that standpoint, and that was at the point of the conversation. But I used the context when I was discussing that as a first-year head coach team.
Bottom line,
so it may have been in that ballpark.
Yes, we basically picked 6 good teams and 2 bad teams. And the bad teams we selected, and I probably would have won this thing if I didn't pick the stupid Raiders, who were just terrible this year. Lance got the Jaguars, and Pearson got the Patriots. 2 teams that are just playing great. Anyway, all right, so Lance in dead last with an embarrassing 72.
The Chiefs were a tough one for you, Lance.
Yeah, Chiefs.
And Bengals.
And the Bengals, where Burrow went down immediately, and that changed their season.
Schmeelk, 74 wins.
Oh,
so you won by 2.
That is much more respectable.
74 versus
2 more wins. And he got that Steelers win at the end of the missed kick.
By the way,
so he would have only had 1 ahead of me if he didn't get the Steelers
Did you have the Ravens?
No, you picked the Ravens.
Okay, so we'll cancel each other out there. I both.
That's true. Yeah, you would have.
But your best teams were the Bills, the Eagles, and the Texans.
Texans were a good one.
Yeah, after an 0-3 start, by the way.
That's true. Yeah, I was not feeling good about the Texans early in the process.
They regrouped.
Your more disappointing ones: Ravens, Packers, Lions. I'd say.
Yeah, the Packers really did not do well at the end of the year. They hurt. They only finished 9-7-1. Not a very good record.
Yeah. Well, the Lions didn't even make the playoffs.
Remember, the Cowboys have their draft pick too. So if they lose early in the playoffs,
Micah Parsons trade.
That could be a better pick than we thought. That'd be around like 27, 28. It could be around like 20 or 21.
Sure. Well, more of a reason why you got to wait and see how seasons play out.
Right.
And don't take for granted that a team is going to repeat.
All right, so Lance at 72, me at 74. Pearson,
And
what did you finish
your
at?
champion got 85.
85. That is
smoked
domination
from the garbage heap.
Well, you got double-digit victories from a lot of the teams.
What were your best ones,
off the
Pearson?
top.
What do you got?
Broncos, Seahawks, Patriots.
I mean, think about
both
that.
1 seeds.
And then I had the Bears.
And the Bears,
And
too.
both-
And the
both-
Niners.
Both
Yeah.
1 seeds
Those
and
4.
both 2 seeds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Both 1 seeds and both 2 seeds.
I'm surprised
Lance
the-
and I were so bad at this. We let the 4 best teams in the National Football League sit there.
I'm surprised
after
the
we picked
Broncos.
12 teams.
You guys didn't pick the Broncos, Niners, or Seahawks, which was surprising.
Yeah, well, sometimes you're not.
And also, remember, the NFC West has been a highly contested division. And Seattle was bringing in Sam Darnold.
And the Niners weren't good
with
last
a new
year.
offensive coordinator.
I like the Seahawks. They were one of the last teams I considered picking, but I think I was worried about Bo Nix in year 2. And they ended up, give Sean Payton credit, man. They've been great. Fantastic.
Yeah. Well, I was also worried about, you look at, again, the quality of the division. The Chiefs' track record. I mean, you could say, well, they were due for that. Yeah, and everybody had these conversations 2 years ago or 3 years ago when Tyreek Hill was traded, and look what happened. So Kansas City has quieted the skeptics more often than not, and the Chargers have been excellent since Harbaugh took over. So you figured, what was the chances that 3 teams in that division, and then you even, thought maybe the Raiders would turn the corner with Pete Carroll. So you're making a case for all 4 teams in that division entering this year. It's not going to happen. And the West has been also 3 teams have been in contention, but, could that happen again? It's unheard of for the same division to have that volume of representation year in and year out. So, I mean, at least that was my thinking as to why I wasn't going to go in that direction.
Pearson, excellent job.
Yeah.
Good work. Congratulations.
For not having to think it through and just basically
taking
take
our
over
scraps
from what we did not select.
Did me and Lance do our playoff predictions, or was that me and Dottino? I think that was me.
I don't
and
think.
Paul,
We
right?
just picked teams that were going to make.
I think Paul
the
and
playoffs with wins.
Yeah, I think Paul and I did playoffs. So we can when Paul and I are next week together, Pearson, we can go over those.
You also
predictions
did over-unders for players and stuff.
Oh yeah,
like that.
yeah. So we'll hit that next week as we continue to do the coaching search and everything else. Guys, thanks for being with us today. Don't forget, it's all brought to you by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the Giants. And don't forget, the Special Olympics New Jersey's annual Snowball is headed to Rutgers SHI Stadium in 2026. It's an annual flag tournament. You're on the field March 6th through March 8th. The 6-on-6 tournament will feature competitive recreational and co-ed divisions. All proceeds benefit thousands of Special Olympics New Jersey athletes across the Garden State. Register your team today at njsnowbowl.org. That's njsnowbowl.org. Thank you for being with us in the Hackensack Marina Hill Podcast Studio. Keep getting better. We'll be back with you tomorrow. It is me and Jonathan Casillas as we continue to talk about who the Giants' next head coach might be and the other big decisions facing the Giants offseason in 2026. For Lance Medow, good job, buddy.
Absolutely.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah.
I'm John Schmeelk. We'll see you tomorrow at 12:30 for another Big Blue Kickoff Live.